All right, technical issue, double jeopardy. Government has only one chance to try you. They only have one chance to take your liberty away from you. They got to get it right. If you are found innocent, you are innocent. They can't rearrest you and take you to trial again for that same crime. If you commit another crime, sure, they can arrest you for that crime, but you can't be tried twice for the same crime. Double jeopardy. You can't be put in jeopardy or in danger twice for the same crime. Self-incrimination. Self-incrimination means you do not have to tell the police or courts anything that would make you look guilty. You do not have to say anything that may put your freedom in danger. So, you don't have to tell the police anything. You don't have to tell a court anything. On trial, you just sit there. Say nothing. Most lawyers will say that's the absolute best thing to do. Never testify, right? Why? Because you don't have to. This is the whole idea, this part of the Fifth Amendment, protection against self-incrimination. Why is it important? Imagine what the government could do to you to force you to talk. It could trick you, deceive you, torture you. It can cheat. All right? It can force you to say things against yourself. They beat you up enough. Are you going to say you're guilty? Potentially. So that's why you have this Fifth Amendment protection. So you see sometimes in the movies, TV, I'm pleading the Fifth, I'm taking the Fifth. That means I'm going to use my Fifth Amendment protection and I'm not telling the police or the courts anything. I have the right to remain silent, as we're going to see here in an important Supreme Court case coming up. Kind of combines the Fifth and the Sixth Amendment, saying you have the right to remain silent, you don't have to ever tell the police anything, and you have the right to a lawyer that helps you protect your rights. It's going to be called Miranda versus Arizona. Important Supreme Court case. So, remember, you don't have to tell the police anything. You don't have to answer questions. That is your right against self-incrimination. You don't have to give the government stuff to help them throw you in jail. Yeah, that was me. The gun's in the backyard. There's pictures on this guy's camera. I did it. Nope. The government has the job of proving you're guilty. You don't have the job of proving you're innocent. It's all on the government. It's the government's job to prove you're guilty. Should you help the government out in that? Absolutely not. Make them do your job. You protect your rights. That's what this Bill of Rights thing's all about. Well, should I just help the police, be a helpful citizen? Every lawyer in the world will say, nope. Police arrest you because they suspect you of a crime. Don't say anything ever. So this is the case, Miranda versus Arizona. We'll study it later in the year again when we're talking about the court systems, but it's good to talk about now. It's a combination of the Fifth and Sixth Amendments coming up. The police arrest this guy. They start interrogating him. He confesses to a crime. He goes to trial. He goes to jail. You get this thing called an appeal. It's basically a second chance. If you could say to a court, hey, something was wrong in my trial, you get a relook, almost a do-over. This is called an appeal. Miranda argues that I didn't know what my rights were. So since I didn't know what my rights were, I confessed to the crime. Because I confessed to the crime, I went to jail. My rights were violated. And you know what? The Supreme Court said, yup. So now today, police, when they arrest you, they have to advise you of your rights and what's called a Miranda warning. Seeing this in police shows, movies, hundreds of times, the police officers arrest somebody, read their rights, sometimes write off a card. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be held against you in a court of law. Fifth Amendment protections. And then it says, hey, you have the right to attorney. And if you can't afford an attorney, one will be provided for you, basically saying, if you don't have enough money to afford an attorney, the government has to give you an attorney. You get the best attorney? No. Do you get an attorney? Yes. So again, get arrested, use and protect your rights. Don't tell the police anything. Don't say anything until you have a chance to talk to that legal professional who's there to help you, also known as a lawyer or an attorney. Due process, important part of the Fifth Amendment, and later on we'll see in the 14th Amendment. Due process means everybody gets these protections. The government has to give you all these legal protections. It has a rule book and steps it has to follow for everybody all the time. It has to have probable cause before it can arrest you. It needs a search warrant to go through your stuff to look for evidence of a crime. You have to be brought before, or evidence has to be brought before a grand jury to indict you. Then when you have a trial, you get all these protections we're going to see in the Sixth Amendment. You get that lawyer, the trial needs to be speedy, you get a right to question witnesses, etc. Great. These are your due process protections. The government can't skip or skimp, or it can't say, we don't like you. You are dangerous and you're a threat. So you don't get a lawyer. You don't get a speedy trial. You don't get a public trial. No. The government has to follow all these due process protections all the time. The government has to follow the rules. Eminent domain, this is a weird one. The government has the right to take away your property. What? That sounds un-American. It does sound weird. This is a violation against my natural rights. John Locke, Thomas Jefferson have the right to life, liberty, and property, pursuit of happiness. So the government can take my land and my home? Yes. Fifth Amendment says, though, even though the government has the right to take your private property from you, eminent domain, you are protected, the government does have to pay you for that. You may not like that. And it's kind of a rough one here, and a kind of a strange, maybe even unexpected twist about a system that's designed to protect your rights. The government can take your property away from you. The idea is the government's taking your property away from you because of a public need or a public good. So they don't just randomly, you would hope, tell you, we need your house and your property. No. They're building a road. It just so happens has to go right through the middle of your home. That's when the government would use eminent domain and take your home and property away from you. The protection you get under the Fifth Amendment is, they gotta pay you the value of that home and property. That may not make you happy. You're losing your ancestral home. Generations of Bienkowskis have lived in this house and on this land, and I don't want the government taking it from me. I get it. Fifth Amendment says the government can, though. You're protected only in the fact that they have to give you a fair value for that property. So does this make eminent domain controversial? Absolutely, particularly when the government's going to take your stuff. So the Fifth Amendment's lots of stuff in there. Man, Fifth and Sixth Amendments are tough because there is a bunch of stuff in the Fifth and Sixth Amendments. Do your best to remember. Fifth Amendment includes, you can't go to trial unless the government presents the evidence in front of a grand jury and they indict you. Self-incrimination. I don't have to tell the police and the courts anything that may make me look guilty. Double jeopardy. They get one shot at putting me in jail. If I go to trial and I am found innocent, game over. Cops don't like it. Government doesn't like it. Too bad. It's a key protection. Why? The government would just sit there with cops at the bottom of the courtroom stairs. You walk out a free man, woman, thinking you're going to sit on your couch eating Takis, playing PlayStation 5. Cops arrest you again. They're like, gee, we didn't want you to be innocent. We thought you're guilty. Let's do this over. No. Double jeopardy says the government can't do that. Equal treatment under the law, due process, everybody gets the same equal treatment. There's a set of procedures, there's a process, The government has to follow it for everybody all the time. It can't skip steps because you're poor. It can't skip steps because you're an ethnic group they don't like. It can't skip steps because you're a terrorist and they don't like terrorism, right? Everybody gets due process, equal treatment. Eminent domain, yeah, it's weird. Locke says life, liberty, and property, but here we go. The government can take away your property. All it has to do is pay you a fair price for it. Sixth Amendment, a whole bunch of stuff in there. And we'll work on it. Sixth Amendment protects your rights in a trial, making sure you're getting a fair trial. So, you have to be informed of the charges against you. Sounds weird, right? But in other governments, and some governments today, you're on trial, you don't even know what you are being charged with. You get a trial by jury. It's not some government functionary that throws you in jail. It's not the judge that says guilty, 80 years in jail. No. It's 12 of your fellow citizens. It's a trial by your peers. It's not the government saying you're guilty. It's your fellow citizens saying you're guilty. Jurors must be fair. Those fellow citizens sitting on this jury have to approach their job seriously and with the idea that they're going to be fair about it. Can that be difficult? Absolutely. Can human beings be fair all the time? I don't know. And how do you prove that they're going to be fair all the time? Can be a challenge. But the system is set up in that it does try to make sure that it's giving you this Sixth Amendment protection of a fair jury. Trial goes in the community where the crime takes place. May sound weird, but if you've committed a crime in Milton, Northwest Florida, you should be tried in Milton, Northwest Florida. Why? Goes back to revolutionary times, King George III. If King George III didn't like you and thought the colonial trial was going to find you innocent, King George III would snatch you up, give you a trial in London, and maybe he'd get the result he wanted. And vice versa, of course. If King George III didn't want the colonial court to throw you in jail and thought you would be found innocent if you're tried in London, King George III would snatch you up and you'd get a trial in London. Great. Founders and framers say, no, we want the local community that gets impacted by the crime, that knows the defendant, gets the chance to sit on this trial. Keep it local. You get to hear and question the witnesses against you. Seems very basic, but imagine not having that right. Imagine you go to a trial and the prosecutor says, all right, yeah, we got these 12 mystery witnesses that saw you commit the crime. Boom, you're done. Well, who are they? What did they see exactly? Can I ask them questions to cross-examine them? Prosecutor says no. Well, how is that a fair trial? So that's why you have this right. You get a chance to know witnesses against you, and you get a chance to ask them questions. You call witnesses in your own defense. I want to call these 12 people who are eating dinner with me who can prove that I didn't rob the bank. Imagine not being able to call witnesses to defend you. You would never get a fair trial. And you have the right to a lawyer. That's going to be, is also means that if you can't afford a lawyer, the government has to provide one. Can you imagine the situation where the Sixth Amendment says, yes, you get a lawyer, but you're poor, and now you can't afford one? What's the recourse? You just don't get one? Yeah, once upon a time. Supreme Court fixes that, though. It says, hey, if you're poor, guess what? To ensure you get your full Sixth Amendment protections and your full due process rights, if you don't have enough money for a lawyer, we'll pay for one. You get the best possible lawyer. Who do you usually get? A public defender, okay? Still could be a good lawyer. Yeah, might be that kid right out of law school like, hi, my name's Steve, this is my first trial. Good luck. Could be. Constitution says you get a lawyer, not ensures that you get a good one. So, Sixth Amendment, again, lumped together, protecting your rights to a fair trial. It's a speedy trial, held in public, not some basement dungeon somewhere. You get to question witnesses, you get to bring your own witnesses, and you get a lawyer, and even if you can't afford one, you still get one. Fifth and Sixth Amendment humor, is it funny? I liked it, I put it in there. Good dog, don't say anything without a lawyer. Eighth Amendment protects you from excessive fines, excessive bail, or cruel and unusual punishment. Fine, pretty easy. One of the ways the government can punish you if you've committed a crime is to fine you, tell you you have to pay money. Eighth Amendment says it can't be excessive. That fine has to be suited to the crime you committed. You committed a minor crime, should be a small fine. Excessive bail. We're going to talk about bail because it's confusing to a lot of people. Bail is an opportunity for you to give the government a certain amount of money that the court holds on to, so you get to walk out of jail and you could go home until it's time for your full court trial. Bail's a little weird. We'll talk about it more. But the government can't put excessive bail on you. If I was arrested of a relatively minor crime, the bail I get should reflect that minor crime. I steal a car, should I have $1 million bail? Probably not. That's probably excessive. And then finally, the easiest part probably of the Eighth Amendment, and the one you usually hear about the Eighth Amendment, no cruel and unusual punishment. The government can't torture you as a punishment of a crime that you've been found guilty of. Can it fine you? Yes, but not excessively. Can it put you in jail? It can. It could even kill you, capital punishment, but it can't inflict cruel and unusual punishments on you. It can't basically torture you. All right, bail. It's kind of weird. Not weird. Maybe confusing if you can't work your way through this process. Okay, so you get arrested. You're held in a jail first. Jail, think of a temporary holding facility until you could have a trial. Well, does the government want all these people sitting in jail? No, it costs money. You don't have to treat them to luxurious accommodations, but they're still taking up a bed. You still got to feed them bologna sandwiches. So the government doesn't necessarily want you sitting in a jail cell, costing them money, particularly for minor crimes, if they think you'll show up for your trial. So if you're going to show up for your trial, that's what the government really cares about, not letting you sit in jail until your trial. And you, the person accused of the crime, you don't want to sit in jail. You don't want to eat bologna sandwiches 3 meals a day. You don't want to shower with 90 people who may want to kill you. You'd rather go home and be with your family and work and make money and play PlayStation 5, eat Takis. So bail, the book describes it, and I think it's a good description, is a security deposit to guarantee that the accused shows up for their trial date. So I get arrested. It's a minor crime. I stole something of low value. Police take me. I'm put into jail. I should pretty quickly see a judge, and one of the things this judge is going to do is going to look at my charges and decide what my bail should be. I committed a minor crime. The government knows it's a minor crime. The judge knows it's a minor crime. So the government should propose a bail that meets that crime. So I did something small. The judge says, your bail's $1,000. Great. Now what? If I have $1,000, I give that to the court. I go on my way. I'm freed from jail. The only thing I have to do now is show up for trial on my court date. That could be weeks or months away. So I go and live my life for weeks. I work, hang out with my family, play PlayStation 5, eat Takis, until my trial date, January 20th. I show up for my trial on January 20th. The court gives me my $1,000 bail back. That's one of the reasons why I've showed up back for trial, to get my $1,000 back. Cool. Does that make sense? Now there's all kinds of other stuff and all kinds of questions I already got. You don't have the money. Great. Then you could sit in jail. Or there's this whole industry of people called bail bondsmen that act sort of like a bank. I don't have $1,000. What do? I go to the bail bondsman. The bail bondsman pays the court that $1,000. I walk free. What's the bail bondsman get out of it? I pay the bail bondsman some sort of money. 10, 15% of that bail. So I pay the bail bondsman $150. They give the court $1,000. I come back for trial. The bail bondsman gets that $1,000 back. So they have made $150. That's why they do it. They make money. It's a business. I lose $150, but hey, I'm not sitting in jail. I would have lost no money if I had that bail to pay on my own. Does that make sense? Always get asked, well, what if you run for it? Yeah. Bunch of things happen. First, if I've paid that bail, I'll never get that money back. I forfeit that money and the court keeps it. So if I get snagged by the marshals or bounty hunters later and I get dragged into court again, if I paid $1,000 bail, that's forfeit, it's gone. And the court now charges me with another crime too. So I got that to worry about, right? If I run and a bail bondsman has paid my bail, they have these people called bounty hunters that go looking for me. Because the bail bondsman doesn't want to lose their money if I don't show up for trial. Does that make sense? Always spend what it seems like too much time talking about bail, but it's kind of confusing and people always ask. Any more questions? Read this slide in Plan Book in the slideshow. Google it, talk to your parents. The easiest way to think of bail is what they call it in the book. Bail is a security deposit that guarantees you show up for your trial. Why? Because you gave the court money, which the court assumes you want back, which you will get back if you show up for trial. Cruel and unusual punishment. The founding fathers and the framers of the Constitution wanted to avoid these horrible punishments that they saw in European countries, and specifically horrible punishments they saw in the English system of justice. So they tell us, they tell our courts that we're going to be protected from cruel and unusual punishments. Basically no torture. The argument remains with the death penalty, because some people will argue strongly that the death penalty is cruel and unusual. To us, what really matters is what the Supreme Court says, because they get to interpret the law, and the Supreme Court currently says if you do it right, the death penalty is not cruel and unusual, so it is permitted. The death penalty is constitutional. So the United States government, the federal government, uses the death penalty. It hasn't for a long time, but President Trump and Attorney General Barr, they are using the death penalty like a machine. I want to say they killed 10 people in the last few weeks. Unusual. In my lifetime, the federal government hasn't used the death penalty as much at all. A little more than half the states have the death penalty. Some states have the death penalty and use it. Florida, Texas, Oklahoma. Some states don't have the death penalty. California, Massachusetts, New York. Be that as it may, Eighth Amendment prevents cruel and unusual punishment, but right now in the United States, death penalty, Supreme Court says it's not cruel and unusual. Now we're going to shift. Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, Eighth Amendments. We're all about the protections you get if the government wants to accuse you of a crime and throw you in jail. Fourth Amendment, need probable cause and a search warrant before they can go through your stuff and arrest you. Fifth Amendment, all those due process protections we get. Government can't take my stuff without paying me for it. I have the right to protect myself. I don't have to tell the cops anything. Don't have to self-incriminate. Sixth Amendment, all those big protections I get with a lawyer, fair and speedy trial, jury of my peers, etc. Cool. Eighth Amendment, now that I've been given that fair trial, the government can't torture me, and bail needs to be fair, and I can't have an excessive fine. Those all kind of go together. At least the book puts them all together. Now the book's dealing with the rest of the amendments. Protections of our civil liberties, but they're kind of their own and they're kind of specific. And they're not linked to other stuff. For example, the Second Amendment. There's an amendment you probably heard about other than the first. It's probably the second. It's big. It's sometimes controversial. Second Amendment, right to bear arms. Cool. Why is it controversial? One of the reasons why it's controversial is if you read it, man, even though the language in a lot of the Constitution and the amendments sometimes is a little old-fashioned, a little difficult, the Second Amendment is really strangely written. I mean, every time I read it, I'm like, are you talking about militias? Are you talking about my right to own a firearm? You know, I'm not saying I'm smarter than Madison and the framers, but there are ways you could have written the Second Amendment that are a lot clearer to us, okay? Especially today. So, what do you need to know about the Second Amendment? Particularly, what would you see in the EOC about the Second Amendment? First, the Second Amendment is about the right to bear arms, owning weapons, and typically we'll talk about the ownership of firearms, guns. It's controversial. There are arguments, even today, where people will say, owning guns, it says it's about serving in militias, well-regulated militias. A militia that is organized and trained by the government, usually the state, and that's how you own guns. Well, why? Why does this confusion come up? What's the Second Amendment really all about? Is it so you can own guns for hunting? Yeah. Is it so you can own firearms, protect yourself against criminals? Yeah. The discussion, or most of the discussion about the Second Amendment when it was written is people needed to own guns to protect themselves from the United States government. We don't always think about that. So the Second Amendment is written to make sure that we understand we have the right to own firearms to protect ourselves from the United States government. Great. The important thing to know is, as of 2008, any debate or confusion should be done, because the Supreme Court gets the job of interpreting the law. And in a 2008 Supreme Court ruling called Heller versus Washington, D.C., this guy named Heller sues the city of Washington, D.C., arguing that their gun control restrictions are so strong that he basically could not exercise his Second Amendment right to own a gun. And when he presents this to the Supreme Court, in a close decision, but that doesn't really matter, the Supreme Court in a 5-4 decision says, here's what the Second Amendment means. It means you, as an individual American citizen, have the right to own a firearm. Period. It's not saying it's linked to being part of a well-regulated militia. Cool. Second Amendment, right to bear arms. Why? for a variety of things now, according to Heller. But remember, the Second Amendment was really linked when it was written on our personal right to own firearms so I could protect the rest of my rights, not just from the British or the French, but from my own government if it became tyrannical. And you will see a question in the quiz, and you may see a question in the EOC that gets you to understand some of the controversy about the Second Amendment. Is people argue whether it's private ownership of weapons or ownership in part of a militia. And the last thing, they may mention the 2008 Heller decision by the Supreme Court. Supreme Court says, no kidding, gun ownership is protected by the Constitution, and it's meant to be individual right to own guns, not as part of the militia. Second Amendment. Third Amendment, a strange one. The third one is quartering of troops. Let's rewind back to the lead up of our revolution. King George III punished the citizens of Massachusetts. Why? They were protesting and breaking his laws. Cool. One of the ways he punished Massachusetts was by stationing more British military troops in Massachusetts. Not only to keep them in line, not only to keep them to obey the law, but it was also an extra punishment because the troops would actually live in the colonist's house. And the colonists had to house them and feed them. That's the idea of quartering troops. So King George III is, I'm going to punish you. I'm going to send these soldiers. They're going to knock you about the head and make sure you're following the rules. And oh, by the way, you're footing the bill. You're going to pay for these troops because they're going to live in your house. Hopefully, clearly, you see why this upset the people of Massachusetts. And that's why it was written in the Bill of Rights. So our government can never do that to our citizens. Does it come up? Yeah, not a lot. But if you have troops knocking on your door and there's this officer standing there and says, hello, this is Private Jones and Sergeant Smith. They're living it with you now. You say, Third Amendment protects me from that. Seventh Amendment protects your right of your right to a jury trial in a civil case. We've been talking about Fifth and Sixth Amendment, Fourth Amendment. That stuff really pertains to criminal cases. The government suspects you of a crime, and now it wants to take away your liberty using a criminal trial. Civil trials are disputes between citizens, and the government acts as a referee. Think Judge Judy, civil trial. The court exists to be a referee to settle a dispute between two citizens, usually called a lawsuit. Your dog bit my dog. You hit my car with your car. Your tree fell on my fence. Disputes between citizens, settled in a court with a lawsuit. Seventh Amendment says you get a jury too. And it has this weird limit of $20, which is kind of funny. Now understand, in 1787, $20 was quite a bit of money, not like today. But it's still in there. You have the right to a jury in a civil suit. Ninth Amendment, cool amendment, love the Ninth Amendment. Go back to the original arguments between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. The Federalists who supported the Constitution didn't think it needed a Bill of Rights. They say, hey, look, your rights are already protected. It's in the Constitution. States have bills of rights, so that protects you. And let's face it, if you start writing down your rights, you can't possibly list every conceivable right you could have. We don't want someday somebody saying, hey, this is the list of rights. That's it. There's no more. There's 10. There's no 11th, 12th, or 13th. Anti-Federalists argued against that, said, no, we'll feel safer, we'll feel more protected from our government if you list the rights, because that's what we're kind of used to. English Bill of Rights, right? States Bill of Rights. So they said, write them down. To get the Constitution ratified, they compromised we got a Bill of Rights, and that's what we're talking about. Ninth Amendment, though, is basically this federalist idea of we can never list every single right, so make sure you understand, government, I have all kinds of rights that aren't listed here, and just because they're not listed doesn't mean I don't have them. Argument makes sense? I have the right to vote. It's not listed in the Bill of Rights. I have the right to privacy. It's not listed in the Bill of Rights. I have the right to marry people. It's not listed in the Bill of Rights. I have the right to drive a car, fly a plane. Of course, not in the Bill of Rights. That doesn't mean I don't have them. I do. And how do you argue you have that right? Ninth Amendment. Or later the 14th Amendment too, but we'll talk about that. 10th Amendment, sort of the same deal. Cartoons, read them. I think they're pretty good. Help explain that. 10th Amendment, sort of the same deal. It says this: powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. What? 10th Amendment says certain powers are given to the federal government. Everything else are powers owned by the states and the people. Those are those reserved powers we talked about before. Enumerated powers given directly to the federal government. Congress can tax. Congress can coin money. Congress can maintain an army and a navy. Cool. Enumerated powers specifically given to the federal government. Everything else is reserved to the states. Marriage laws, driver's licenses, divorce, voting laws, big right now. Okay? Schools, all of those things aren't mentioned in the Constitution. They are not enumerated. They're not given specifically to the federal government, so they belong to the states. So does the federal government, does Washington, D.C., the United States run elections? No, it has no power to. 50 states run their own elections according to that state's law. It's reserved to the states. Marriages, same thing. Divorce, child custody, states. Schools, states. 10th Amendment says if it's not given specifically to the federal government, it's to the states. I think we're getting close to the end. Questions? Good cartoon. Read it. Help you understand 10th Amendment. In our slideshow, where's all our stuff? Plan book. Adios. Right now as I'm filming this, it's a couple weeks away from Christmas. No, even less. 10 days away from Christmas. Whether you're watching this in 2020, 2021, or 2031, be well, be safe, enjoy your Christmas and your holiday.